So, hello, Mara. Are we ready for the big announcement?
Hello, Scott. How are you? Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
Good, good. Okay, so, well, here we go. We got some big news. And the big news is that you and I have decided to start a humanoid bot company, which is going to build a bipedal humanoid bot for the home.
This is real,
And
right?
yeah, and we've come up with a name for the company. It's Decision
Okay.
Technologies Limited. Yeah, and, we couldn't decide what to do next, so we asked an
Yeah.
MBA for help, and he suggested that we hire a prestigious marketing firm. So we went out and we searched, and we found the best one out there, which is Cluster Hide, A Ton of Time, Gross Pain, and Trap. They refer to themselves as ChatGPT, and, one of the first things that we did is we tasked them to come up with a catchy name for a bot that tied in with the company name. And it took them a couple of months before they came up with it, but they finally get around to it. And they said it should be called the Domestic Environment Cleaning Intelligence Multi-Action Task Expert, also known as
Mm.
Decimate. And the reason it took them a couple of months to do this is that they had another option they were going with, and they decided to run a focus group. And the focus group thought decibel sounded too loud. It might kind of scare customers away
Mm.
from the name, So decided that, they should go for decibel. And they even gave us a
Wow.
marketing campaign to start out with. And that is, you know, decide to decimate your best made decision. So yeah, so there's decimate after I think cleaning up the mess,
What
but
is happening in the
whatever.
picture? That what?
So I think decimate has literally decimated the house. Okay. So all right. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to design our bot for the home usage, and we're gonna decide it's gonna be a bipedal bot. So yeah,
I can't wait for that. And congrats for the new company. Yeah.
but 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 what we have to first what we have to do is we have to make a joint decision. Yes, and the joint decision is basically what are the important aspects of it. And there's this kind of well-known philosopher on X who once said that proper joint selection is a pivotal part of any humanoid bot design. The pivotal part. Yeah. So, so that means we really have to get in and think about it. So, what we want to do is we want to do a top to bottom, top, top to bottom audit of all the joints that would be in a humanoid bot, and we're going to use what's called the in-out principle. So, when you go in and you want to like come up with your best design and something, there's always these questions of like, do I need this? Do I not need that? Does it belong in the design? Do I kick it out? And so what we're going to go with is the in-out principle, where you keep it.
Let's take a second. This is something
Yeah,
you invented by
I
yourself
think, yeah,
for people robotics. We need to make it clear. This is yeah. I appreciate that you came up with that. I think that's something. Hopefully, people for many years to come they use it as a tool, uh, get to principle in their design.
I had kind of the idea in my head when I was working on a project a few weeks ago, and then jotted that down. And then with a little help from AI, I was able to hone it down because it didn't quite have the acronym the way I wanted. And then it's like finally got it. So it sort of meets the original vision I had. And the idea is that you think about, keep it in, toss it out. And so you start from the top. You've got to look at something, a component you're putting in design. In this case, we're going to be looking at joints. You have to ask the question, is it indispensable? And if it's indispensable, it means it just won't function without it. I mean, if it's not there, forget it. It's not going to work. The second is it needed? Okay. And which may sound similar to indispensable, but it's sort of like, well, it will function without it, but it will severely limit the ability. And so it's like, okay, it's needed. We need to put it in there. Then you get in that middle of where it becomes optional. And that is, it's basically, it's not essential, but keeping it in there might make some aspects of life easier. It's like when we talked about the hand, the big argument of do we put the abduction in the hands? Is it really needed? It's like, well, if you want to have your bot playing the piano, yeah, but if your bot doesn't have to, do you need it in there or not? And, you kind of look at that. So another way to look at the optional is sometimes it might be more like the optimal. So by putting it in there is when you are kind of like optimizing the design. It's that last little thing you put in there that just gets it over the finish line. So you may or may not need it. And that's sometimes the toughest call right there. The first two are almost an easy call. And then the next ones are, also kind of easy. But then there's the useless. It offers absolutely no practical benefit or purpose. It's like it's there, but it's like, does it really need to be there? And then finally, there's a toxic. It's not only is it useless, but it actually undermines or degrades the performance with absolutely zero benefit. I mean, it doesn't add anything to it. All it does is just distract everything else. So sometimes those calls will be very easy to make, and other times you will say, well, I have to think about it a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, let's go ahead and design the humanoid bot and start looking at it. And there's many different discussions you can have depending upon your use case on what is the best form to have. So, do we go with a bipedal bot? Do we go with a bot that's going to be on a mobile platform with wheels? Do we have a bot that only has the torso? And that depends upon your use cases. And I know a lot of people are very strong that you only need one. If you get a bipedal bot, it's really cover your bases pretty well. But some people might say, is it too complicated? Do you really need it? Why not just put it on a mobile platform? And there are situations where it might make perfect sense. So in a very structured environment, a factory environment where everything's flat, you don't have stairs to go up over, you don't have obstacles in the way, and everything else, it might make sense. In a home environment, what we talked about in the last broadcast is that, sometimes, and anyone will see the home is not an ideal environment for a wheeled vehicle. And people find that out as soon as they have to bring someone in a wheelchair. They have to like change everything around the house because suddenly they realize it's very difficult to get around in there with a wheeled vehicle. So if you're going to be designing a bot for the home use, you might be thinking, oh, okay, does it make sense to put it on wheels? Because you're going to have narrow access ways, you're going to have stairs, and you have to go up and down. It might have like a simple little step in there. You're going to have stuff all over the floor because, kids, pets, stuff like that to pick up. So you might say, maybe bipedal makes a bit more sense to do that. The idea of a torso, you don't necessarily need to have a torso unless you're saying, oh, we're going to have a robot that's going to be assembly line for Apple iPhones. If you've ever seen the assembly line in Foxconn for Apple iPhone, you see the workers just sit there the whole day. They literally go out of the way to make sure the workers can't move because they want to keep them there. So it's very difficult to get in. Once they're in there, that's the whole time. So you can say at that point, yeah, we don't need a bot with it if we're going to be doing that. So those are the different use cases, and that's why we're going for the home market because we're going to try to look at that and make some decisions about which joints belong in, which ones belong out, because our use case is specific to a particular domain where we may be able to make those calls a little bit better. So that's where we're going to go. And the first thing we can do here is I'm going to go ahead and show rough outline of what the Decibot's going to look like. Okay, so see that right there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, the reason I put it up here is to help us understand what the joints are that you're typically going to have in a humanoid and decide what goes in under your cup. Now, we can go down this sort of exotic thing of putting in joints that people don't have and everything else. And it's like, well, let's try to keep it as close to a human as possible. And that means, we're going to have joints here that are going to move up and down on the shoulder. That's usually called the shoulder pitch. This will be the shoulder yaw. This will be the shoulder roll. And I'm trying to use a color coding here to make it easier. That usually, yaw, pitch, roll, and XYZ will be red, green, blue, stuff like that, depending on the accent. So we're going to focus in on all these to get an idea. So if we're not quite sure what a joint is that I'm talking about, we'll come back here to understand exactly what it's going to do. So, we can see that, different leg movement that we have here, how it's able to go back and forth, etc. So, and then of course we can move the torso around. We can also move the head around and do things like that. So these are the possible degrees of freedom or joints that we'd be able to have in a bot. So what we now want to do is have a comprehensive list where we can go through and decide, all right, what's going to be the best approach right now. And so I put together the sheet. Okay, so I've got this Excel spreadsheet here, and we're going to go down through here, and I've already made my selections, but I'm not revealing it. Okay, so I want you to be able to come up with your answers without being influenced by what I think. And then I've sort of put the outline of what's here. And the way we're going to look at it, we're going to look at different limbs and decide, from there, the different joints that might be in a particular limb and the actors that make up that particular joint. And I've put over here for reference, some names that might be the common names for it or what actually a biomechanist would actually call it. Uh, and so we can kind of go through, understand what it is, and then we can discuss whether it makes sense. So we've got the head, we've got the arm that's made up of shoulder, elbow, wrist joints that have different axons making them up, and then the torso and then leg. So we're going to literally go from head to toe. So do you want to start with the head?
Okay, let's go.
All right. So just tell me, do we need a head or not?
In the robot design.
Yeah. Do you think a humanoid bot should have a head?
I think, yeah, for the vision, I think vision, the camera, I think we need for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, you would say it's
Actually, but quickly, I'm sorry to say that, but uh, I think I forget the name of the what is the name of the startup in the Oregon University?
agility. Yeah, they're
Agility.
figure.
You don't have a head. You don't have agility. You don't
Yeah,
have a head.
yeah. I mean, they've got a very small head, and the thing. And I'm glad you
Mm-hmm.
brought up agility because agility started out from University of Oregon or Oregon State University,
Yeah.
and they built a
Yeah.
bipedal mechanism, and they wanted to figure out what was it good for, what can we do with it, and they wanted to figure out the platform that you put on legs. And they really wanted to think outside the box. Like, we don't want it to look like a humanoid. We want to find out the particle. And as I started to go down here, I began to realize that more and more the humanoid form is kind of what you needed. So they had to give it a torso, but they were stuck on the head. So for a while, it didn't have a head. It kind of had a camera mounted near the top. So it had like more
Mm-hmm.
of a neck with it on there.
Yeah.
And eventually they put it up there. And they intentionally did not want to put a head on it because they did not want the uncanny valley effect or something really creepy. But they put something on there and it's adorable. I mean, it's just like, it's not frightening. You kind of look at it. It doesn't scare small children. Unfortunately, small children want to go up and hug it, which is what they wanted to prevent.
Mhm.
Um, but it's there for the express purpose that it's a camera tripod. And for just about every humanoid bot that's out there, that's really the purpose of the head. It's a camera tripod. Um, and most of them have nothing. I mean, agility is making clear there's nothing there but the camera. Um, Apollo has also made it clear because when you look at the head, you'll see it's empty. There's nothing there. I think when one of
Mm.
the Unitary bots, you can see there's nothing there. So they're making it clear that we're just using it kind of as a platform or something to make it look a little bit familiar. So you can argue, okay, what's the utility of having the head up? It's adding some mass. I think figure might actually be filling the head because since it's there, it's like um, we're competing for space throughout the whole box, right? And it's, you're carrying this
Mhm.
orb around that's empty. Maybe we can fill it with something. So I think they might be putting some of their, not all their compute, but some of their computer up there. So it may have a practical purpose. The main practical purpose is the camera. And I've seen people in comments of like, why do you have a moving head? Just, have cameras going around. Cameras are cheap. They're cheaper than an actor. So
Yeah.
head, yes or no?
Is it?
What's your
Yeah.
thought? I mean, we're talking about the head,
I
not the
think
axes
it's
right now. Do you
yeah.
think you need to have a head? Is that like an INOU? No, we do go I or N.
I
Is,
ran. Okay. I think I
is it
think
indispensable or is it needed?
no. I think it's needed. Indispensable is too much. I think
Okay.
it's.
Yeah. Okay. So you would go with N. Okay. Now, so we basically say a head is N and there's a neck joint. Okay. So we got a head. Do you need a neck joint?
Good question. I think you have been arguing about that a lot. I think the leg joint. I think the movement, the maneuver. I think if you have to manipulating,
Just in general. I mean, do you need any movement?
I
We'll
think
argue about which
I
degrees.
think yes. For me, indispensable. I think indispensable.
Okay, so once you have the net, well, yeah, okay, so you got to go from N to I. All right, so we'll go ahead and put the I in there. Whoops, for some reason, I just want to do I. Thank you very much. Okay, there we go. Um, and now then, let's think of the X. So the X is basically The maybe. In other words, it's the nodding left to right.
Mhm.
Um, so how important do you think that is as a degree of freedom in the neck, back and forth?
In my opinion, I don't think it's not needed. It's not needed. So, and I think it's
So
just
it's probably useless. I mean,
useless.
is it
Yeah.
toxic? I mean, it could potentially be toxic if it's not needed, but
I
it's
think
we yeah, we can say that.
complexity, unneeded complexity, and could be
Yeah.
toxic
Yep.
in that case.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Now that you have the yes, which is deflection, up and down like this. Okay, nodding up and down. Now, I guess the idea is you've got a camera there, right? And how useful is the nodding up and down going to be?
I think it's needed. An environment will you
You think
walking
you okay?
needed.
So,
Yes.
you feel it's needed. Okay, so we've got it's needed, and then we've got the other, which is the no, left to right. Is that needed?
I think if maybe I'm wrong. If I can get one of these as in my design, I can at least make assumption about the environment. So I don't think it's
Mhm.
needed, in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay, so you'd say like optional, or let's not put I wouldn't put it as toxic, but something like that. Okay, I mean, in some ways you're kind of right because it's a redundant joint. And so if we just kind of look for a second here, you know, I can move my head in multiple ways. I can go like that, right? Or I can just turn my torso, or I can just shuffle my feet and get myself around the room. So I've got multiple ways to kind of go without. In theory, I can also bend my head by going forward, but that might be like literally leaning too much into my work. So sometimes you might say, I want to do that. And if I have to go that way, maybe I just turn my torso. Now, it does come with a little, I mean, the problem with turning my torso is if I'm holding something like this and I turn my torso, I might suddenly go out of reach with one of my hands. So that's going to affect it. So if it's right here, maybe it's not a problem. The other thing is sometimes it takes longer to turn my torso than my head. But we do have redundancy in it. You need to put it in there. And it'll depend upon the use case. It's one of those things that once you build a bot, you'll look into it and decide that, oh, we need that. And we know Optimus did that because they had that problem. Well, the first one had absolutely no degrees of freedom. And then the second bot, they ended up putting 2 degrees of freedom in there. Um, Agility just went with one, I believe. I think they just have the one. And I'm checking with Boston Dynamics. I'm not sure if they have two. I know their head rotates backward because that it does the owl thing. It goes all the way around. Uh, but the but I'm not sure if it can nod because hadn't really seen anything that indicated that it could nod. So, but okay, so we get kind of that there. That's where you are. Okay, now we'll go down to the arm. I guess
It's your turn. This is your turn now.
it's my turn. Okay, I already got it. Now, see, I know already what the answer is, but I guess we can say that the arm is indispensable, right? You kind of agree it's indispensable. We
The
need the arm.
arm, of course,
Yeah,
manipulation. I think. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Now we can always argue. I mean, there will be people like, "Oh, you don't need an arm." If I get a mobile robot that's just carrying boxes around, that's basically a mobile platform. It's like I don't need an arm. Like, oh, maybe you do need an arm to put the boxes on. Well, then you need only one arm. Okay. So if we want to talk about those different platforms, we've decided it's a humanoid form factor. Okay, so I guess
It's
we have to say the arm is
interesting. I
indispensable.
think it's called. I think it's
Yeah,
for warehouse, for example. They have this mechanism that it's not arm, but they use this kind of racks, and
yeah,
so it's completely different. But I it depends,
right.
to be honest. So, but
There's
it's
different
yeah.
ways. And there's different kinematics. So there are a lot of industrial robot arms out there, and not all of them are what they call an articulated arm. There are those that are like gantry systems that have slider joints and everything else. But we're just going to kind of stick there, like, all right, we're going to kind of build something that looks like a humanoid arm. And humanoid arms have a shoulder, an elbow, and a wrist. And so the thing is like, well, I assume the shoulder is very important, indispensable, right? Do you agree with that or not?
Mm. I think it's needed. I feel like it's indispensable. It's indispensable to
Yeah,
show.
yeah, yeah. I think it's the point that it is itself indispensable. The shoulder is indispensable. Okay. Now, uh, for the X, why? Okay, so we basically have these three joints here, and we're moving the shoulder. There's that red joint here, just for reference, which is like the joint that you would see if you were like pumping your arms like this, swinging around. Then you get the green joint, which is allows your arms to go up sideways like this or flap your wings if you want to think of it. And then you've got this blue joint, which is kind of rolling somehow. I mean, I can't even do it. It's more like my forearm is moving here, but there is something that's there, which is that red joint. So of this, of the first one, the red one, do you think it's um, needed or do you think it's indispensable?
I think it's not needed. I feel like if we
You
had
don't think
the
it's not needed if you're going to have the arm?
no,
You know, if I,
I feel like
how,
not. I feel. I think it's not needed if I have the rotation, for example. I can
oh, the red one or
yes,
the
the
blue one?
blue, the rotation, the blue one, the rotation.
Oh, the blue one. Yeah,
Yeah.
the blue. So basically, I think we agree the first two, the red and the green, are needed or indispensable. Probably. What would you think? Indispensable?
I think you're right. Maybe indispensable. Yeah. I think if we
Yeah,
have to,
indispensable. Yeah, yeah. Because basically, what they do. So we'll just kind of well, we'll go down this and we'll come back and I'll let argue and show what's going over my. And this one here, you're saying the role, it's probably optional or needed or
um,
not. You're saying kind of not needed.
I think it's needed. And the rotation part, I think it's needed. It's needed. If I can't, if I,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
it's
very much
okay. So
needed.
you'll
Very
put
much
it in.
needed.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is yours. Okay, this is supposed to be yours, not mine. I've already got mine answered off the side. Okay,
I hope it's not
now
all
the
wrong. It will
elbow.
be embarrassing. Yeah.
The elbow like needed or is it indispensable?
Of course, I need it. Indispensable, indispensable, indispensable.
Indispensable.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're putting it as indispensable, and then obviously, if it's elbows indispensable, that joint is indispensable too. And then we get the wrist, and so I'm assuming that the wrist is also indispensable, right? Or is it needed, or is it optional?
It's indispensable. The wrist.
Okay, so wrist is indispensable,
Although I
and
see
then
the most of
Mhm.
again, like unitary, they don't have a hand, but it depends. It's just if we speak about in the
Yeah,
functionality
yeah,
for
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
whole thing.
Exactly. The functionality becomes indispensable, doesn't it? So now, here to give an idea what some of these joints are, because everyone may not be familiar with the wrist axes. Along your forearm, when you go to open a doorknob, that's the part that's rotating. That's the blue part here. And then your hand kind of clapping up and down like this, that's the green axis. And then the red axis here is the one that makes your hand go back and forth like this. That's usually referred to as the yaw, and I jokingly call it the carpal tunnel syndrome. That's why the CTX is it. That this is where you get that injury. So is caused by that movement there. So,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
all right. So, within the wrist, are all these joints indispensable?
The wrist.
Yeah.
Uh,
So the first thing we think this one here,
yeah.
or that's the
I
bottom one
think
down here.
it's not needed. If we speak again, is it so much crucial? I don't think so. If you manage to have a grip or anything, and that is, you know what I mean. It's not. It doesn't have to be a
Mhm.
hand form, and that's where my intuition. If I have to go beyond the human form, I can use something completely different than the wrist. Maybe I'm
Okay.
wrong. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, there's different ways of doing it, different ways of getting orientation. The question is whether you need all of them and which ones are like really critical and which ones may or may not be. So,
Of course,
s-
I think the role. I think the role. The role is too much need. I think there's a lot of manipulation, like opening things, putting.
yep, yep,
So I
yep,
think it's
yep.
much needed. Yeah.
So this is kind of indispensable for the
Yeah.
role. The pitch,
The bitch
that's
is not really. I don't think it's unless I have to grasp something. Like if I have to do this movement by my
Mhm,
hand. But
mhm.
yeah, I don't think it's no
Is it needed or optional?
this movement because it will be like that. This is
Mhm.
the pitch around the x axis, so it
Yeah,
will
yeah,
be like
going up
that.
and down like that. Not the x-axis,
The
the green axis. So that's
the green
basically
axis, yes,
clapping up and down.
yes.
Yeah, the green axis going up and down.
I
So
don't think
you're
no. I don't think it's no. I don't think it's indispensable. It's just not indispensable. So it's not.
maybe necessary or optional.
I think it's necessary if I have to go for I think it's
Okay.
reminded me of
Yeah.
the last episode when you speak
Mhm.
about the
Yeah.
grasping and you have to have this
Yep.
movement, so have rotation and
Mhm.
inflection. So,
Yep.
yeah, so I think
Yep.
it's both of them needed.
Yeah.
Rotation,
Now,
flexion. Yeah.
finally, we have this movement back and forth
I don't I
on
see
the
it
game.
just I think no. I abduction again. It's not
Yep.
we spoke about that. It's just if you have
Mhm.
something extra, but
Like
I don't
optional,
think
or
optional. I
you
think
would
it's optional.
use it optional or necessary. Okay, so
Optional,
it's
yeah.
kind of optional.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we're moving along pretty well here. And now then, let's go ahead and take a look at the spine in the torso. So the torso can be made up of multiple joints. Um, and so typically they just concentrate on the spine. I mean, we could make it like a real a real torso, but then we have too many degrees of freedom. So usually the idea is to focus somewhere down here in the lower abdomen area, and you've got 3 degrees of freedom there, which you have the yaw, the pitch, and the roll, which are typically thought of as that the rotation we talked about earlier, like being able to move my head back and forth. So that's the twisting about the center line of your body, which gives you that rotation. And then there's the leaning where you kind of move forward and sort of see something like that, also known as flexion or extension, but that's kind of your lean. And your tilt is like this kind of left to right, being able to go in there. Okay. So the spine, is the spine indispensable? Is it important?
Mm. I remember that you argue about this a lot, I think, with most of the
Yeah.
I think with figure,
So,
I'm not sure, or electronics,
yep.
but I think you asked if you ever remove one joint would be the spine, I think, and they said yes. So it seems not.
Yeah. So
It
so
seems
basically, like the torso itself as a body member is important. The question is whether that torso needs to have a spine. So that's the overall thing. It doesn't need to have a spine. And it seems it could be, it's like optional. It's not needed. It's sort of like, oh, maybe you don't. But if you do, let's, assuming, okay, we want to put one of these 3 degrees of freedom, which are the ones are the most important if we decide to go the route of actually having a spine? Because agility digit does not have a spine. It has a torso, but it doesn't have a spine. And I don't mean it in a mean way. I mean it's like that's their optimization like.
okay. I think that's interesting. The rotation part is just yeah. I don't think rotation is necessary. I don't think rotation will not
You
be
don't
that
think the twisting
necessary.
is not necessary. Okay. And then you
Twisting, yeah,
okay,
twisting is not necessary. But
so you
if I
would
have
say
to
it's
use, if I have the
basically
arm
unnecessary or
movements,
optional.
I think
Yeah.
it depends because we have two direction here. You said it's redundant joint. It depends on
Mhm.
the design it
It's
choices.
highly
So,
re yes, it's highly redundant. There's no doubt
so,
about it.
so you have
Highly
to
redundant.
choices. So I have to sacrifice it. So it it seems no for me. If I have to choose one of the, it will
Mhm,
be
mhm.
not. Yeah, I think that the if I have to think about based on the answers that we give it, like in the hand, for example, and the neck. I think what's so the XYA will be which like the flexion and extension will
So
be in this
X
direction.
is basically the leaning left to right.
The
So being
X.
able to grab your
Ah,
shoulder. Yep. X is
and
right.
the
So
bitch
it
and
basically it's
the
the axis
man.
going forward.
Yeah.
So it's like leaning left to right.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that
And
would be
okay. And this is the lean. You mean the lean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's and then the lean is going forward. So the lean
Mm.
is going forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and let me go back to the model itself. Okay. So right here, just so we know. So
Okay.
this is the twisting. And as you can see, I mean,
Mm.
we're able to change the position of our head the same way doing that. And then we have actually, this is the,
No. No.
what I'm calling the leaning back and forth. And then the other one, which is not, actually, it's not quite modeled here, but you can almost think of that because we're going to see
Mm.
why it's done the way it is. And that is if you were to actually lean the whole body forward.
Mm.
Um, so in other words, the effect would be if I take my legs and I move my legs up like this, it's
Ah.
causing the whole torso to have that angle.
Okay.
So
But it seems
I've
yeah.
yeah, I've kind of given away the game here a little bit.
So it seems
on
a
what
twisting. Yeah, of course, it seems twisting here for outreach and manipulation will be crucial in this situation.
so twisting could be, I mean, it's the leaning is one that everyone is not quite so sure about. That's the one again, going left and right. That could be optional, unnecessary. What do you think?
The leaning,
Oh, the lean. Sorry, the leaning forward. Right. So
no,
this is
I
this
think it's
is
optional.
basically
Yeah,
this is basically optional,
yeah,
and actually, in some ways, it's unnecessary because it's redundant. So it kind of goes out because it's not really needed. And then we have the tilting back and forth, which
yeah.
is that optional? Is that necessary? The leaning left to right?
No, I think it's optional. I think it's just not necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Or not necessary. Okay. So if it's not necessary for you. Okay. Now we get down the legs. Of course, since it's bipedal and we're going to be moving around, it's indispensable. We're not using an AMR. Okay. I just put the term circumduction in here to let us know that sometimes the movement of the legs and everything it does is a combination of all these rotations that are sort of needed to do this movement. And this is sometimes what biomechanics refer to as circumduction. Basically, the movement of all these things, so the end of your foot is able to like trace out a circle or an ellipse or something like that of a certain shape. Now, the movement we have here again, um, so this axis here, the red axis is going kind of perpendicular to the body. So it's along the forward direction or the x-axis here. That's the Y, or what they call the abduction. And the abduction is what you usually associate when you do the splits with your legs, okay? Um, and then there's the Y pitch, which is going through here, which we just saw. It was that green axis, which is in effect redundant to the lean of the torso. And then, so that's called usually flexion extension. That's the one that's important for walking. That allows you to do your stride. And then finally, you have the Z, which is actually rotation about the axial member of the leg, the straight down the axis. And that's what allows you to make your toes go in or out. Now, if you ever want to do that. And that's usually referred to
I
as
think
the medial lateral rotation.
expand the Chinese bot. I think they had this in their design. Expand, I
Yeah,
think.
they all have it in some way, and they have a very interesting way of doing it on how they combine it
The
together.
linear, using
So,
linear,
all
I think.
yes,
Yeah.
so up here in the hip joint. So if you basically look at these three axes, you see they all kind of intersect right there at that point. That's a very common way to be able to do a movement like this. Is that you'd like to have all. They don't always do that. And Optimus doesn't do that, for example. And I think some other bots. I don't. The X-Pen doesn't do that either, because they move the axes around. They actually have their stride axis as the third axis, not as the first axis, rotating up here. But if you look at that, which of these do you think is indispensable if you want to walk?
Hmm. For sure, I think the stride is very important. The stride.
That's yeah, that would definitely be indispensable. I mean, if you're going to have the joint at work, that's the one that's really important in getting it to work. Okay. What about the ab adduction?
This is interesting. I don't. I think it's redundant. I don't think it's. Unless I saw it in the bipedal, for example, like these, some of them they use is abduction. It's just extreme. But is it needed in the human form? I feel like it's not that necessary. I think it's not necessary for the human form.
So you would say unnecessary or optional?
Optional. Unless
Optional.
I have to navigate something very, yeah,
Mhm.
extreme situation, maybe.